welcome to the latest episode of the PiXL Drone Show, our weekly podcast where we talk to people who do groundbreaking work with drones. As always, my co-hosts are Karen Murphy and Greg Reverdio, and today we have Bill Wimberley, the head of business development at Wingcopter, as our guest. Wingcopter is a German developer and drone manufacturer that use their drones for both commercial and humanitarian applications. And you will probably have heard about their drones. The Wingcopter 198 is a fixed-wing drone that was used with UPS in the IPP program. And we'll be sure to talk more about that later on in the show as well. Bill, welcome to the show, and thank you so much for making yourself available today.
Yeah, thanks for asking me. Sure.
Awesome. Well, can we perhaps start with a little introduction about your history with drones and your position within Wingcopter, so that we know that for the audience?
Sure. So I got interested in drones when I spent a year and a half in Afghanistan, back about 5.5 years ago, and I won't dive into that too far, but really fell in love with that whole idea, that whole concept of drones, and obviously not for necessarily military purposes, but for doing good. Also, I'm an aviator back since I was 16 years old. So I learned to fly an airplane before I could fly a car or drive a car. So, but yeah, that was really the introduction. And I found Wingcopter about 3 years ago. I was actually looking for the best drone company that I could find in the world, because I really wanted my career to go in that direction. I wanted to stay in that particular focus, and I did a lot of research. I found those guys, reached out to the CEO, which at that time and even now is Tom Plumer, and I said, "Hey Tom, I'm very interested in what you're doing. I've got a lot of startup software development and hardware development experience, so I think I can help you." And so we started a discussion, and I joined them full time about 2.5 years ago in Germany.
So you moved actually from the US to Germany and spent time living abroad, or?
I did. And I started when they were in an incubator in Darmstadt. They were in the Merck incubator, very small company. I think they were like maybe 22, 23 people with the company. Now the company is about 130. Yeah, I was one of the sort of the really early guys working with the founders.
Can you tell us a little bit more about how Wingcopter got started?
Yeah, it's really a fascinating story. There's a great YouTube video about their starting, but there's a guy named John Hesselbarth, and he is an aviation entrepreneur and an inventor. And he actually invented the original design of the Wingcopter, and then he met Tom Plumer, who was a marketing guy, an aviation guy, and had a lot of experience with drones at that time period. And they got together and decided, hey, we think we could have something here. Let's work together. And then they brought on a third team member, Ansgar Kadura, and they were the original founders of the company. Quite frankly, the company had revenue before they were even a company. The design of the Wingcopter was so captivating that when they showed it to people, they really were interested in buying it. They wanted this aircraft. So they said, well, I guess that's sort of the impetus for us to form a company. And this was about 5 years ago when all that took place. So fascinating beginnings of the company.
So, I mean, you don't hear that too often, right? That a company already is making revenue before they officially get started. Like, what was the appeal? Like, what made that drone so special that it got so much interest so early on?
So the idea, I think they were one of the first ones in the entire industry to design a vertical takeoff, but fixed wing forward flying aircraft. Now, obviously, there are things in the military like the Osprey and other such aircraft that preceded this, but taking this and miniaturizing it into a drone footprint. Jonathan, as the inventor, was one of the first guys to do that, and it was just captivating. The idea that you can take off and land in a very small spot and then fly horizontally at very high speeds and travel very long distances was captivating to people, and it opened up a bunch of different possibilities that just didn't exist with the multicopter at that time. So it just opened up a market that just wasn't there.
So if we fast forward, you're talking about how the company was different back then. What do you think makes the company different today now that there's competition and other companies that are designing similar type of aircraft?
That's a great question. And the thing is, in order to be successful in the small UAS industry, you have to have a focus on safety, durability, and reliability. It doesn't really matter how far your aircraft can fly, how fast it can fly, how high it can fly, how much payload it can carry. If you can't meet the regulatory requirements to put your aircraft in the airspace, whatever country you're talking about, it doesn't matter. So from the very, very beginning, going back 2.5 years ago when this current model of the aircraft, the Wingcopter 198, was conceived, it was conceived to be a type certified aircraft. It was designed specifically to operate in regulatory airspace. Most aircraft are designed, most of the not necessarily aircraft, but most of the drones in the commercial space are visual line of sight drones. Mm-hmm. So you see people doing inspection, you see them doing real estate photography, you're seeing all kinds of different things. All of those aircraft are flying in the visual line of sight under a Part 107 license, which is very easy to get, low barrier of entry, and that's a very simple segment of the drone industry to participate in. Wingcopter is a BVLOS, beyond visual line of sight, only aircraft. It is designed specifically, again, to fly in regulatory airspace. That's probably one of the biggest differentiators, other than the eVTOL fixed wing configuration that provides a lot of flexibility.
Yep. I think we'll definitely come back to this topic, but before we go there, I wanted to ask you: are there any benefits for Wingcopter to be a German company and based in Germany?
Actually, there are. From a U.S. perspective, the U.S. is very interested in bringing companies like Wingcopter into the U.S. market. So we have been courted quite nicely by the German Accelerator program and the Select USA program with the U.S. Department of Commerce. I think Germans are known for quality and design, so especially in aviation. So it has been an asset, not a liability, for sure, to be a German company.
Yeah.
So where are things now with Wingcopter?
So Wingcopter is currently in the type certification process with the Federal Aviation Regulation Agency, and we are working very closely and very diligently in that process. It's a very long, very complex, very costly process to get that regulatory approval, but that's really where we're focused heavily, and also being innovative in other areas like our ability to carry multiple packages, our ability to have one-to-many pilot commanding of the aircraft. We're constantly innovating ways for our aircraft to be better and better. We're pursuing right now a very, very high accuracy landing system that will allow us to pinpoint landings even on moving objects. We're working on even more sophisticated telecommunications connections and things with partner vendors. So Wingcopter is advancing in all areas of UAS operations, including our recent partnership with a company called Sprite, which is a division of Air Methods, which brings to us a very unique ability to be in the medical industry, and ultimately when we're approved with the Department of Transportation and the FAA, doing medical delivery of hazardous materials across the United States.
You actually jumped right into my next question. I was going to talk about the other partnership that you have on your website, which is with LATAM in Peru. Can you tell us a little bit more about that and what you're doing there?
So we've pursued partnerships all around the world. We figured out very quickly that Wingcopter can't be everything to everybody. We certainly can't, do everything in the U.S. aviation space. So we have, in particular, myself and one other person have worked very hard on setting up these partnerships. So that's one in Peru. They're an operating company that will fly our aircraft and will be, providing services to countries in their jurisdiction, I guess you would call it. We're also working with companies in Chile and Brazil and Japan and Europe and the United Arab Emirates. So it's part of our strategy to partner with those kinds of companies, and we're excited about the latest one being the company in Peru.
Awesome.
So, and then the other partnership that was recently announced is with Sprite for medical deliveries right here in the United States. Can you tell us about that partnership as well?
Yeah, we're very proud of that partnership. So I don't know if your listeners know who this is, but Sprite is a division of Air Methods. Air Methods is the largest air medical helicopter company in the United States. So most people don't know that a large percentage of the hospitals in the U.S. outsource their emergency services in that respect. And these guys are the premier company in that space. And their CEO had the vision, along with the founder of Sprite, to have a UAS division here several months ago. And we teamed up with them, and now we are strategic partners in the U.S. They bring to our capabilities a knowledge of the medical industry and connections and relationships in the medical industry that we wouldn't otherwise have. Mm-hmm. And we bring to them the ability with a uniquely designed aircraft to do medical delivery. So it's almost like the perfect partnership in this particular space.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned earlier that the Wingcopter drone is really a beyond visual line of sight drone. Like, what kind of criteria are you looking to meet when you look for partnerships? I mean, I can imagine that you have certain applications for your drone in mind when you look for partnerships.
So right now we're focused, like I said, heavily on the type certification process in the U.S. That opens the doors to a lot of other countries because there are reciprocal relationships with regulators in like Latin America, Japan, Australia, other places. So that's a real high priority. But the other one is that particular capability just opens so many doors for us. So I don't know if I answered your question. Maybe.
Yeah, I mean, yes and no, I guess. I mean, what I was also looking for is that you see drones being used in many different ways. And for instance, earlier in the week, there was a story in the news about two companies in Norway where they're looking to use drones to deliver milk. And in my mind, when you use drones for delivery, I think about, okay, so you need something that's of high value, let's say relative small size, not a lot of weight, where there's a high level of urgency, and maybe also combined with remote terrain or rural areas where the benefit of delivering something with a drone is much greater than if you were to take a truck. I was thinking about those kind of criteria. If that's stuff that you guys keep in mind when you look for new partnerships.
Yeah, then sorry I didn't answer that as directly as I should have. The answer is, delivery is really where we're focused right now. Yeah. And the reason for that is delivery plays into the strengths of the aircraft. The aircraft is vertical takeoff and landing. So the landing site and the receiving site, or the launching site, do not have to be very large. That's important. The other thing is the aircraft is designed to fly a long distance at high speeds and carry pretty reasonable payload, 13 pounds of payload. So it's a really good fit for any application where distance, speed, reachability, I would call it, maybe, for example, over a mountain range or a long distance to a disconnected community or whatever are important criteria. Yep. Those fit perfectly with the Wingcopter. The applications that are more BVLOS, as we spoke about a minute ago, are not really great for the Wingcopter, being, like power line inspection and things of that nature. Not right now.
Yeah.
So Wingcopter had revenue early on. You had people interested in purchasing even before the product launched. Was it self-funded? And how does getting investors involved change the trajectory of the business?
Yeah, great question. So, like a lot of startups, it was friends and family to begin with. It was founder money, friends and family to get to the company to the first level, and then we had some early sort of angel investors to come in from different parts of the world that helped kind of get us to the next stage. We had a $20 million, Series A round last year that really propelled us to the next level, and we are in the negotiations and discussions with various entities for the Series B later this year. So it's been kind of followed a normal path of a startup. Pre-founding revenue was not very big revenue, but it certainly got us a lot of visibility in the market. That's for sure.
Let's talk more about the drone specifically, the Wingcopter 198. It's a fixed wing drone. We'll see if we can edit some photos of this drone into the show, because I think the design is pretty extraordinary. Can you tell us about the specs of the drone?
Yeah, so let me focus on the design. First of all, the Wingcopter is arguably the most beautiful drone in the industry. You would not believe how many comments we get every time we go to a show, every time we fly the aircraft. We've closed so many opportunities within days of flying the aircraft and people seeing its capabilities. Not only its beauty as an aircraft design, but its flight characteristics, its speed, its agility, and those kinds of things. So, it depends on obviously the conditions that we're flying in, the payload, and all that. But we can get as far as 120 kilometers distance out of the aircraft. Like I said, we can carry up to 13 pounds of payload, and there is no real restrictions with respect to flying in the rain or in harsh conditions. One of the things that is one of the major advantages of the aircraft is its extreme aerodynamic design. So in very high winds, it performs beautifully. And other aircraft that don't have the same aerodynamics, or multicopters that don't have the aerodynamics at all, really, just can't compete in those kinds of projects where we're flying.
So we get a question all the time from our students when we talk about BVLOS, drone delivery, and all of that. How does a drone like this, how is a drone like this allowed to fly beyond visual line of sight when typical off-the-shelf drone are not? And I know the answer, but I would like you to explain this to the viewers, how this makes a difference between the two, and why you guys have to go through this entire approval process and do everything that you do behind the scene.
So you're probably very aware that the regulators own the skies, and there's potentially a lot of traffic in those skies, from police helicopters or medical helicopters or taking off and landing at airports, and so the regulators are very guarded about their airspace, and so it is a challenge to get authorization to fly BVLOS. Right now, in order to do that, we have to get basically waivers, and so in places where we fly, we contact the FAA. We present our concept of operations. We present our safety plan. We prove that the aircraft is safe in the conditions that we're going to be flying. And we're only allowed right now to fly under waivers. And it's usually, point A to point B at certain altitude, certain speed, and avoiding certain infrastructure. There will come a day when we get a type certification and the FAA it provides that level of flexibility that will be opened up more and more and more to ad hoc routes and ad hoc concept of operations. But right now it's quite restrictive, and we have to be very careful in how we approach every one of these projects.
Yeah, and I know I've read and I've taught about the concept of Operation 2.0 for the UTM that the FAA has put out several years ago now,
Yeah.
and in that document they talk about DAA, detect and avoid technology, and I always have this question when we talk about drone deliveries and BVLOS drones and maybe even autonomous drones, is this science fiction at the moment, and is this the limitation of why this is not more routine?
It's one of the major ones for sure. So we have been researching, talking with vendors, collaborating with partners for months about DAA, and the the detect and avoid situation is going to have to be on board an aircraft that's allowed the full operating ConOps that you would desire for commercial deliveries. So we're working with some of the top companies in the world in DAA technology. We're also in the process of evaluating and looking at building our own internally. This is just not an easy task. I mean, when you have an aircraft flying at the speed we fly with the kinetic energy we have, I can assure you the FAA and all the regulators want to know that we are extremely safe and that we can avoid objects almost instantaneously. That's a very big challenge. But with our partners, we are confident we're up to the challenge. It's just not easy, and it takes time.
Yeah, and I know one of the fears in the industry from people that fly smaller aircraft, including unmanned aircraft, is the fear that this type of operation would take over their operation and prevent them from flying. What can you tell our listeners that may be worried about this, of how this is going to be organized so that it doesn't happen?
You know, that's like you said, the UTMs will play a role in this as that rolls out in the U.S. and other places. But you know, one of the challenges we face is the non-cooperative aircraft. So it is generally thought that flying in the rural areas is the safest because you don't have the air and ground risk. However, believe it or not, crop dusters are uncooperative or non-cooperative.
Mm-hmm.
They do not have the requirement to have some of the radar and detection stuff. Some of them don't even have radios.
Mm-hmm.
So detect and avoid is equally as important, maybe in rural areas as in urban areas. So that's something we're working through with the FAA, and we have calls every week with the FAA. Our partners are generally on those calls with us. We're discussing and negotiating and figuring out how to work together. And so we're probably as far along as anybody in the industry in getting this proven out. But, you know, like we just said, it's not easy. This is a tough road to hoe.
Yeah, sorry, I have so many follow-ups, but this is a topic that I'm fascinated with because I think there's a lot of concepts out there by the FAA, and I think there's still a lot of answers that are just not out there. You mentioned manned aircraft that are flying in the UTM below 400 feet, helicopters, crop dusters, and other participants.
Yeah.
Do you foresee a time when the UTM, the below 400 feet, would become a unmanned aircraft world where manned aircraft have to play and be active instead of passive in their participation?
You know, we sure hope so. I mean, I think there's been some discussion about crop dusters having transponders.
Yeah.
Today they don't. And it's my understanding that there's a resistance to that. I mean, obviously, this is airspace that's been kind of reserved for these different classes of aircraft for a long, long time.
Mm-hmm.
And so, adding another layer of high-speed aircraft in the airspace can be unpopular with some groups.
I can't imagine.
But the commercial opportunities here are really huge, and the opportunities to do what we want to do, which is saving and improving lives, is really, really compelling.
Yep.
And so we know that we'll get there. The question is, how quickly will we get there?
So, for instance, if you look at the partnership with Wingcopter and Sprite, where it's about medical deliveries to and from hospitals, the flight paths that you're talking about, are those predefined and preset and pre-approved flight paths where you fly from A to B and back?
Yeah, and that's one of the good things about our emphasis on B2B. So we are really focused on B2B, not B2C right now. I know there's some competitors that are B2C, more power to them. I wish them all the success in the world. But you can imagine how much more complex it is to convince the FAA that you're going to take off from a single point and fly to a myriad of points that might be different every day.
Yeah.
Which is delivering to a home, for example. So if you notice, all of the B2C guys are flying from point A to point B, and it's a fixed route, right? So in our case, B2B, from hospital to hospital, clinic to hospital, diagnostics lab to hospital, those are known point A's and point B's, right? Yeah. And so we can plan out the route such that we avoid unnecessarily ground and air risk, which is exactly what we do. And sometimes we go way out of the way to go from point A to point B, as opposed to how the crow flies. But since we can fly so fast, we can still usually get places faster than any other means of transportation.
Yeah. So you're comparing it, let's say, with, for instance, drone up and flying drones to make deliveries from Walmart stores, where they fly from one store to all these different households. And I can understand why that will be a lot more complicated. Now, for instance, if you look at Zipline, they had a different approach, right? I mean, rather than trying to get started in the United States, they took their drone to Africa, to Rwanda, and basically used their drones to fly from point to point there. Is that something that Wingcopter thought about, maybe taking their drone to a less regulated, less busy airspace and see if you can get started there?
So we've been operating in Malawi for 3 years. We are currently building out the entire infrastructure for delivery of medical supplies in the country of Malawi, including drone hubs and various routes all over the entire country. So we did the same thing. We did pretty much the same thing at about the same time. We have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands, of hours of flying BVLOS in those parts of the world. We've also done this in Japan. We've even done some trials in Ireland and in even Germany. So we've got plenty of BVLOS experience, and we also have plenty of ConOps and SORA experience for BVLOS, maybe as much or more than anybody in the world. So, yeah, I mean, that was a good approach. I think, again, as I said earlier, the B2C is just not somewhere we see ourselves right now. A couple of years from now, yes. Now, focused 100% B2B.
And then trying to get B2B started in the United States, where arguably the regulation, I guess, is perhaps most developed and the airspace is extra busy. Once you are able to prove that your business case works there, it'd be easier to take it to different countries?
Yes. But simultaneously, we are flying in those other countries. We've done some really cool projects in Japan, for example, with our partner there, which is ANA, All Nippon Airways. And we are getting ready to do some projects, really cool projects in Latin America in a couple of different locations. So in some ways, it may be a little easier to fly in those areas, maybe not because the regulations are much lower, but because they tend to be much more rural. You don't think of Japan as super rural, but when you get down far south in Japan, there's some disconnected communities where there's a lot of distance between the communities. So, it has some of the same aspects.
And for those of you that are trying to figure out where Malawi is, it's Southeast Africa. I just looked it up because I didn't know. I want to go back to what you mentioned earlier about the point A to point B route, because I had this question lined up for later, but I think this is a good time to talk about it. There have been discussions from some local governments that want to restrict access to the airspace for your type of operation to be over easements instead of being direct point A to point B. Are you working with these types of municipalities or local government to kind of educate them on what it is that is around the corner so that we don't end up with, I would call them unnecessary regulation?
It's really interesting that you bring that up because right before this call, I had that very discussion with a project in Northwest United States, and where the local regulators want us to fly across the easements instead of flying across a road.
Yep.
And ironically, the road is a dirt road that may have 2 vehicles a day on it. And you can imagine the Wingcopter, let's just pick arbitrarily 300 feet, flying at 80 miles an hour. For that aircraft to crash on that road, the likelihood is so remote, based on the glide path, that it's almost comical. But the person I was talking to said, yeah, but we've got to prove it. We have to pull the road traffic and the infrastructure traffic and compare that and put all the data together. And I'm like, okay, we can do that. But yeah, you're right. There is actually in some parts of the world, like in Ireland, for example, the waterways are being offered up as possible pathways, like the rivers, to fly down. The electrical grid, the easements for the electrical grid, and even maybe some pipelines that don't have explosive or flammable materials are open for that as well. I don't know if that's ever going to catch on or not, but I get what they're trying to accomplish.
So you said earlier that you're committed to Wingcopter drones being safe. How do you actually ensure that these drones are safe? What steps do you take to make sure they don't fall out of the sky or that the probability is low? What happens if they do? Do they come equipped with parachutes, or is there a possibility to add that on?
We deal with that every day. So, some of the aircraft have parachutes. Wingcopter does not. It will not ever. The reason for that is because we fly at very high speeds, whereas most of the guys that are carrying parachutes are not flying very fast. Deploying a parachute requires a lot of weight occupancy on that aircraft, and we're already dealing with a ultralight aircraft to begin with to save for the payload. And furthermore, the aircraft is deploying a parachute at 80 miles an hour is probably not very advisable. So the only place that a parachute has any impact at all is in takeoff and landing in the vertical space, and that is such a short period of time that we are trying to convince the FAA that that's not a good idea for us. The glide slope and other things, but we do that with hardware and software. So hardware-wise, we have complete 100% redundancy in everything. So there is no single point of failure. If you notice, the Wingcopter 198 has 8 rotors. It has dual batteries. It has multiple GNSS. It has multiple flight controllers. There's no single point of failure. That's number one. Number two is we have procedures in the software. If something out of normal happens, and there's a variety of scenarios, then the aircraft knows what to do to mitigate any risk that it might create. Number three is, as was mentioned before by Greg, is the DAA. We will eventually, it'll be several months, but we will eventually have a highly sophisticated optical DAA system. We will be able to identify objects some very far distance out and be able to have the aircraft automatically take some evasive action, or if time allows, have the operator that's sitting at a computer somewhere be able to take evasive action. But, we're doing everything we can think of with respect to connectivity, with respect to GPS coordinates, with respect to all of those things to make sure we know where that aircraft is at all times, what it's doing, and if it deviates one bit from what it's supposed to do, there's a bunch of things that can happen to take care of that.
I have kind of a long-winded question, but I want to preface this because I've been for several years fascinated with the airline industry and seeing how they're trying to reduce the number of pilots on board of the aircraft. And I truly believe that in several years we will see pilotless aircraft. I know it's not a popular opinion, but I believe this is where the industry is going. So, and I believe that the UAS industry is actually going to precipitate this feeling. You mentioned earlier multiple operators on your aircraft. And I'm assuming there's a certain level of autonomy with your aircraft at the moment. Are you at the point now where an aircraft could be fully autonomous without an operator? Is the goal to have an operator maybe surveilling different aircraft at the same time, and then eventually move to fully autonomous operation? I'm really interested in that side of the business.
So the Wingcopter is autonomous. But there is an operator that is watching the aircraft at all times. So on a computer screen, just like what we're on now, what I'm on now, the aircraft is always observable and always can be interacted with. But it is a waypoint driven operating system. So we tell it point A to point B, and we tell it how high, how fast, and it goes to where it's supposed to go. So that's coming. It's coming very fast. We're also in the process of developing one of the first one-to-many flight control systems. So our aspiration is 1 to 10, so that one operator can manage 10 autonomous aircraft.
Wow!
You can imagine the complexity of that, and you can maybe even imagine the FAA's excitement about that. So,
or like thereof.
So, and then there's the discussion about, what's the attention span of a pilot. I think in that case, a pilot becomes an air traffic controller.
Yeah.
So I think there's a lot of research on how that works out, but you won't see that anytime very soon. You may see the FAA allowing us to, for example, run tests at one of their test sites with 1 to 2 or 1 to 3, maybe. And we'd have to clock a bunch of hours to prove to them that works and that our pilot is capable of managing multiple aircraft, and then you're going to have all the sophistication of DAA and GPS and multiple LTE and all that kind of stuff. So we're a ways off, but we're working for that specifically in the days ahead.
Yeah, your pilot becomes a system engineer and making sure that they understand the aircraft and how it's going to react in certain situation. And I can imagine that different phases of flight, you'd have one person surveilling different phases of flight. It would be interesting to see the training that's going to be. My heart is in the training industry. The training that's going to be required for these pilots. Is this something that you've been starting to think about? Is how do we train these operators to do these kind of jobs versus traditional flight training?
Absolutely. And you know what? It's interesting. We get a lot of people contact us and say, well, I'm out of the Air Force, whatever country it is, and I flew F-15s, so I would be a good drone pilot. And we say, irrelevant. Then we have the guys that fly DJIs, with the stick control and stuff, and they say, okay, well, we're ready. Yep. We say, no, not really relevant. Other than the flight characteristics and understanding how aircraft operate and the aerodynamics and so forth, flying a BVLOS UAS is a completely different situation. It does require a lot of training. So we have our own training facilities in Germany, and we bring in people to learn, because we have, I would say, roughly 4 years of BVLOS expertise flying. We've seen probably every possible scenario, both good and bad, in BVLOS flying. But at the same time, our partners here in the U.S., Sprite, are going to be an authorized trainer for us here. We will have authorized trainers in other parts of the world, like Latin America and Japan, and we will embark on getting all of those guys up to speed and proficient by the end of this year easily.
Outstanding.
So I want to jump over to who you think your competition is. Would you say Zipline, Swoop Aero? There's a company called Mana Aero out of Ireland. Who's your biggest competition?
That's kind of a multifaceted question. So everyone you named is really doing well in the market. There's no doubt they have good aircraft. No doubt they've made lots of flights, and they've really had a lot of success, like us. So we're kind of all in that sort of upper tier category. Zipline's really focused on a completely different delivery model, as you know. One-way parachute delivery, which is ideal probably for B2C in most scenarios. Swoop and Matternet that you didn't mention, and some others, Mana and others, they've been really focused heavily on the B2C. You'll also see a lot of our competitors will talk about medical delivery. But here's the deal. The aircraft, as I said before, has to be safe, durable, and reliable. But in addition to that, the operations of the aircraft are critical path. And it is very difficult, in my opinion. I'm sure there will be a lot of people that disagree. But in my opinion, it is very difficult to be a premier operator and a premier OEM of UAS aircraft. Now, I know there's several of them doing this, like Zipline and others. But at the end of the day, you don't see Boeing trying to be American Airlines, and you don't see American Airlines trying to be Boeing. It's hard enough to build aircraft and continue to innovate in the UAS space. And on the other side of that, it's hard enough to be an operator of UAS in the airspace with all the regulations and maintaining those aircraft under regulations, in this case, Part 145 in the U.S. And so those are very different tasks, and they're very complicated. So we think our approach is the best approach, and that is that we do what we do best, which is primarily build aircraft, although we do operate them too in humanitarian projects in other places. But we are really good at building aircraft, and we partner with people that are really, really good at flying those aircraft and know the operations. They know the regulations. They have the connections. They have the credibility. They have the expertise, and so that's been our approach, and that's how we're moving forward.
So I want to shift gears a little bit and go back to UPS. I think UPS both used Matternet drones as well as, I believe, Wingcopter drones. But recently, the CEO, Carol Tome, said that, and I quote, this is from Bloomberg, she said this about delivery drones, is that you cannot fly them when it's windy, you can't fly them when it's rainy, and there's a lot of issues with drones. Would you care to comment about what you mentioned there?
Can you guarantee me that there's none of my UPS buddies going to listen to this?
Promise.
I don't know if we can.
Actually, when Carol is a really smart lady. When I saw that comment, I was shocked.
Yeah.
The very reason UPS originally selected us in the last quarter of 2019 was we took our aircraft to Kentucky, and we flew in the wind and the rain, and they were shocked.
Mm-hmm.
They had not seen, I don't think, up to that point, an aircraft that could fly in the wind and the rain. And if I'm not incorrect, it was raining, and it was about a 30-mile-an-hour wind with gusts to 35. And our aircraft took off in front of their flight forward op team, and along with some others from the airline. Remember, like 30 or 35 people in the showcase, if you will. It took off directly into the wind and flew around multiple times, hovered almost completely stationary about 10 feet above the ground, and the oohs and ahs were confirming. And we signed a contract with them about 6 weeks later. So that's probably the best answer I can give you.
Yeah, I remember seeing that comment, and I thought, wow, I mean, it seems like for a company like UPS, because they can do both B2C and B2B if they so choose to. If anybody would have options to deploy drones, it'd be a company like UPS, you would think. So to have them say something like this was, raised a few eyebrows for sure.
to all of my buddies at UPS, love you guys.
I have kind of
Thank you.
I have a follow up from Haya's question, and that has to do, and this is my personal opinion. I think drone delivery for what I would call non-essential goods, tube socks and a coffee bag and whatever it is, I don't think that's a viable business at the moment. What am I missing? Is this really the future, or should we really concentrate on delivering drugs and the things that you are talking about with the medical industry?
Dang, you guys are going to get me in all kinds of trouble. Wow. Okay. So obviously this is my opinion. This is my opinion, but our position at Wingcopter is we want to, and it's right there on our website, we want to save and improve lives. I don't personally care if you get your tube socks an hour sooner than you can buy a truck. I'm not interested, and I can't speak for our founders. You know, they may have I don't think they do, but they may have a different opinion. Those trivial goods are more of a marketing thing than they are an impactful thing. And so let me give you an example. We know for certain that we have saved lives with the Wingcopter. We have delivered vaccines. We've delivered medical supplies. We've delivered pharmaceuticals and things that were needed very quickly. And these are places like, there's another place that you may not be aware of in the South Pacific, an island called Vanuatu, which is a South Pacific island, and it has disconnected communities. And we know for certain, we've been seen visibly how we were able to save lives and improve lives. So to the extent that a product saves or improves someone's life, and I don't mean by, they get tube socks an hour quicker, that's where we want to be. And that's where we're focused. And to the guys that want to deliver pizzas and beer and hamburgers and stuff, more power to you. I wish you well.
So no pun intended here, but what are some of the obstacles you think exist that stand in the way of drone delivery taking off?
It's not the technology. It's really proving to the regulators that we can do it safely. That's pretty much it. The technology's there, the ability to carry packages, to deliver them. Even we're working very quickly toward being able to deliver hazardous material in a touchless environment so that we could ultimately deliver blood and organs and things, and do that not as a marketing pitch or a marketing sizzle for photographers, but really truly deliver high value emergency supplies to places. And we can do that right here in the United States, by the way. There's lots of disconnected communities. But it's really proving to the Department of Transportation regarding transporting those goods and the FAA that we can fly safely. That is, and I wouldn't say it's a hurdle. It's just something we need to convince them of and collaborate with them on, and then ultimately we'll get there.
So this was the perfect segue into my next question, to do with the FAA. My question really is: are the current drone regulations, are they standing in the way of the drone delivery business taking off? And if so, do you feel that the FAA is structured appropriately, or do we need perhaps an unmanned division of the FAA that is dedicated to facilitating this rapidly changing and growing drone market?
There you go again, man. You're getting me in trouble.
Sorry, man.
In defense of the FAA, we're introducing an aircraft in the airspace that really disrupts their entire model.
Yeah,
and they and this is not an easy thing for them to swallow. And I understand why. I mean, the U.S. is the most crowded airspace in the world, and if I were in their shoes, I might be in the same position where I would be extra cautious. So we are working as closely as we can with them. Do I wish their regulations were easier? Of course. Do I wish they had a division that would focus completely 100% on UAS and really help us be an accelerator for this in a safe way, as opposed to maybe, oftentimes a break.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. It's funny because I was in Ireland talking to the IAA, the Ireland Aviation Authority, and they're under EASA, as you are probably aware. And I was struck by the comment that one of the guys made, and he said, here in EASA in Europe, we're focused on trying to figure out a way to incorporate UAS in our airspace proactively. We are not taking the same stance as we, that I'm speaking for him, perceive that the FAA is slowing down the process.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that's true or not, but I think there could be a little more collaboration, maybe. But all in all, I get both sides of the issue.
Yeah.
I really do.
Yeah, I mean, this has come up in many of the shows we've done before when we talk about the FAA, and I mean they are in a tough spot, and I think we all realize that. Do you know of any example around the world where you would say, okay, this aviation authority right there, they got it figured out, or they have the best model? Because we've seen, for instance, Amazon did their testing purposely in England. We've seen Wing from Google to do it in Australia. We have Zipline in Africa. I mean, is there a best place where we have best practices?
Yeah, I don't know that I would say it that way. I think there are countries that may have be more aggressive with
Mm-hmm.
this. I mean, you remember, U.S. is the leading technology company in the world. I mean, all of the technology unicorns, virtually all of them come out of the U.S., right? So
Yeah.
A lot of countries are seeing the UAS as an opportunity for them to sort of get in the limelight. I know that, again, when I was talking to the IAA, who's part of EASA, that they aspire to be one of the leaders of drone technology in the world. Our friends in Japan aspire to do the same thing. They want to be noted as sort of the innovators in this space. The guys in United Arab Emirates are very aggressive, wanting to be known in this particular industry. We've kind of got a lot of sports here in the U.S., right? So we don't have to necessarily be so focused on one. And so, I hope that came across correctly. But there are more aggressive countries with the regulators than the U.S., and they're more collaborative, I guess you would call it, than what we're seeing in the U.S.
Since we're talking about regulation, I want to bring up remote ID. I think it's a very controversial topic. I'm sure you've read, listened, and seen other things. How do you think remote ID fits into your operation? Is it going to make it harder? Is it going to make it more or easier for you to operate and do what you guys do?
No, we're already doing that anyway. So we did a project on the West Coast in San Diego, flying from San Diego to Coronado Island with a company that I can't name, but and we had to integrate remote ID 2 years ago. So yeah, it is what it is. We're going to end up with transponders on these, and we're going to have a full board avionics before we're finished.
Do you think everybody sharing their airspace, including the small guys, I'm going to call them the small guys, the one that are operating your DJI drone, do you think that's critical to you knowing where other aircraft are located so we can better integrate everybody in the airspace?
Yeah, that's another area I'm going to get in trouble. So I fly DJI drones myself. I'm a Part 107, and I'm conflicted about that. I get why it's important in the airspace, because even a small DJI like I have can do some pretty serious damage if my aircraft is hitting it at 80 miles an hour. It's probably going to bring down my aircraft, right? So I get why that's important. But on the other hand, the hobbyist guys, I get why they want to be in the airspace doing what they're doing as well. And the guys that are taking photographs for real estate and so forth. So It's a tough one. It's
Yep.
it's really a tough one because the airspace is going to get really crowded really quick. Um, I know that in United Arab Emirates they banned all private UAS because of the recent attacks.
Yeah.
So wait until that happens here. I mean, and it's inevitable. One of these days, somebody's going to be crazy enough to launch one of those into some crowd or something, and then watch what happens. So I think we've got some rough seas ahead for sure.
Yeah. I think you've combined it really well. I have the same exact feeling as you do. I understand the concept of remote ID, but then the implementation is maybe not the best at this
Yeah.
stage. I do want to talk about another topic that I think is interesting and that a lot of our listeners have been asking about is how are you going to deal with what I'm going to call drone pirates that are going to go after the loot that you are delivering to other people? And this may not apply necessarily as much to you because you're going between hospital and hospital, but what happens when we start delivering in the front yard of somebody's house, and then everybody knows that there is a package coming down and shooting
Yeah,
it?
that's a great question. So there's some really cool companies out there all over the world that are building these receiving boxes. There's one company, and I'm trying to think of the name of them now, but I'm blank, that actually bores a hole in the roof of your house and has a like a chimney receiving system.
Huh.
Uh, Pretty clever. There's other guys that have boxes that that sit out in your front yard that are concreted into the ground and have an ID. They're maybe 8 feet tall, where it's pretty hard to get up on top of them, and so you'll see some real cool innovations in that space. For us, medical delivery, our partner Sprite has designed and is producing out of Israel a really cool hazmat receiving box where the Wingcopter will, and it's not there yet, but it will be there by this summer. The Wingcopter will be identified with the software coming into the box. It will then validate and then open the box, drop the package, and that package will be sorted by whatever means is chosen, all where it would not have to be handled by an individual. So for security purposes of hazardous material. So you're going to see tons of innovation, if you're not already, in that space. And we love all of those guys, and we want to work with, as many of those guys as it makes sense to work with.
Is there any concern about just a myriad or increased amount of noise in the airspace due to drone delivery?
Dang, you guys have all the good questions. I was just at Manifest last week, and that topic specifically came up. So the Wingcopter is turning 8 rotors to take off vertically. But when it gets up to about 10 meters, it is converting to forward flight, shutting off 6 of them, and only relying on 2 of them in the forward flight mode. And at altitude, the Wingcopter is virtually silent. So we don't really have any issues with that in the flight pattern. And so far, our preliminary decibels are below 80 in the takeoff mode. Now, obviously, that I don't remember what the distance is and what the wind factors were and all that kind of when all those things were taken, because we're in the preliminary stages of that. But we believe we are as quiet or quieter than anybody in the takeoff, and then forward flight. There's no one that can compete with Wingcopter on silence. No one. And so, yes, that's going to be a big factor in the acceptance of these aircraft flying. Yeah. That's where Wingcopter really shines. This was another factor, I think, in when we flew and demonstrated our capabilities to several companies around the world. When it got to altitude, which is maybe 100 feet, 150 feet, and we did a low pass over the crowd, it was virtually silent, and it was shocking to them how silent. Because again, you're only using two forward propellers at a less RPM rate than you would in takeoff, and then you have the advantage of the airfoil, which is a wide wing with winglets in the 198. So I mean, it can't be any quieter. I can't imagine a design that would be any quieter.
Awesome.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe you mentioned this, Care, because I was working on some questions. But wasn't it the wing drone from Google in Australia where they use really small propellers that they had some complaints, I think, about noise with those drones?
Yeah, exactly.
I was wondering. I mean, for Wingcopter specifically, are there other areas that you guys are looking to branch into? Like not areas geographically, but I mean, let's say mapping or search and rescue or modeling or inspections, those kind of drone applications.
So I think Greg will appreciate this. In order to get a type certification, you have to certify a certain configuration of your aircraft. And you have to prove in front of the FAA its capabilities in that configuration. So, it is counterproductive to have an aircraft that is a multitasking aircraft. So ours is a delivery aircraft exclusively for this initial TC. Now, after the initial TC, we will look at other applications that might make sense, that might have slightly different configurations. But then we're going to have to go back through the TC. Not the full TC, but a supplemental TC in order to get those certified. So it's counterproductive for us to be a jack of all trades, but rather a master of one.
Yep.
How long do you foresee that certification process will take for the United States and for your drone?
Wow. If you can tell me, I'm all ears. It is a march towards a goal that could have a lot of bumps along the way. I mean, for example, the original G1 document out of the FAA was we were shooting for, I think it was 1,200 population density per square mile, which is the second tier of the TC regulations. And it's my understanding that may change now with a new document coming out of the FAA. So I'm not close enough daily to it to know, but we're actually changing a tire on a moving car, right? So the FAA is learning and updating their regulations while we're simultaneously working with them to get our certification. So if they see something in one of the drones that are going through certification that they didn't think about, then I think they are going to take the option to add that into the TC process if they so choose to do so. So it's going to be an interesting dance in the coming months. I hope we're hoping and that we can get this done in 2023. That is our current march toward that. But we don't have control over that. It's really the FAA.
Yeah. Wow. Like one of my favorite FAA employee keeps telling me, he said, we're moving at the speed of government. So that's how fast things are happening. You mentioned earlier that you saved lives, and you saved lives. Can you give us examples of things where drone deliveries are making a difference and some success stories?
Yeah, so I mentioned Vanuatu. We delivered vaccines for children from a hospital to remote villages. And in those cases, those children did not have access to the vaccines. And, vaccines are cold chain, and they, it's not easy to move them around. We've been talking to a company that I can't name about doing this in Indonesia because of all the disconnected communities and the lack of access. You wouldn't believe the hundreds of millions of people that do not have ready access to a cold chain vaccine that is so sensitive as like the COVID vaccine. So the opportunities to save and improve lives is with that in one thing is one thing. The other one is organ delivery. Organs have to go quickly, and if you know much about it, you know that if there's a heart in one part of the country and there's a recipient in the other, they usually put those, in a chest and fly them on a jet aircraft, and the cost can be just astronomical. The other one is blood delivery. Believe it or not, there is, again, I can't really say who this is, but there's a major city in the U.S. that their EMT has problems getting blood to strategic locations in the city when there's an accident. And so there are ways of the drone can highly speed up that effort and deal with the distance and the time that are required there. In another country I can't really mention, in Africa, their blood supply organization is talking to us about sending blood rapidly to locations all over the country. So, I mean, those are really good examples of just for sure saving lives and improving lives. So, on the improving lives side, you see in industry there are parts and things that end up costing tremendous amounts of money if they don't have them. For example, a wind farm, in order to make a repair to a windmill, can be extraordinarily expensive. And if there's not a little single part like a bolt or a wrench, a specialized wrench or something that is not highly readily available, they're looking at drones to quickly deliver these things from a supply location. So shore to ship, there's opportunities to transverse the waterways and the oceans and things to deliver things that are important or critical. So, I mean, there's a myriad of applications for improving and saving lives with a drone, for sure.
I love it.
Yeah.
I love it.
I agree. I think there's a lot of opportunity. You already mentioned earlier in your show that you think the Wingcopter 198 is the most beautiful drone. Our last question for you here, since we're already over an hour, I think, is what is your favorite drone to fly yourself?
I'd love to fly the Wingcopter, but I don't think they'll let me. No. I'm kidding.
Not after today.
I mean, I have a DJI that it's a flying camera. I'm a photographer.
Yeah.
And I love flying, and the aspect of getting a camera up in the air is really cool for me. So I've been able to film some state parks in Texas and do some really cool video and photography. That's a blast doing that. So I think the DJI is a darn good aircraft. But the Wingcopter, I hope, my aspiration is someday to be certified in that and to be able to fly that drone. But it's a bit scary to fly something that sophisticated and expensive.
Yep.
I can imagine. Well, thank you so much for making time available today. I mean, one of the things we want to achieve with this show is to basically educate people and inform people about all the different use cases of drones. And I think you've made a very strong case today for the need for drones and how they can be useful. So thank you so much.
Yep.
For people listening and watching the show, if you want to learn more about Wingcopter, we'll put all the links in the description. So be sure to check them out. They got a lot of cool news stories on their website. And if you enjoyed the PiXL Drone Show, of course, be sure to subscribe and please share it with your friends and family. The bigger audience we are able to reach, the more interesting guests we can get on the show, and the better the show will become eventually. All our episodes air on Tuesday morning, so be ready for this one to go live. And yeah, thanks again for watching and listening, and we'll be back to you with a new show next week.